It's time to talk about June's Journey, a hidden object mystery game with a captivating detective story. When you're playing, you solve a mind-teasing mystery of the roaring 1920s while you dive into June's captivating quest to uncover a scandalous family secret and solve her sister's murder. It's mystery, it's danger, and it's romance, and you never know where the next chapter's gonna take you. If that wasn't fun enough, you get to customize your very own luxurious island estate. Seriously, I cannot stop playing. I am already on the 3rd chapter and I just started recently. Join me back in time in the glamorous 1920s. June needs your help, detective. Download June's Journey for free today on iOS and Android. Join all the listeners who are listening right now ad-free by clicking subscribe on Apple Podcast, going to patreon.com/themurderdiariespod, or in Spotify, search The Murder Diaries ad-free.
Welcome back to The Murder Diaries. I'm Natalie.
And I'm Paige.
When 19-year-old Brittney Wood disappeared from Mobile County, Alabama in the early summer of 2012, nobody knew she was missing. In fact, for more than 48 hours, not a single person in her life realized she had vanished into thin air. But how can that be possible? How does a beautiful young woman like Brittney, someone with a network of close-knit family members and friends in a small community, literally drop off the grid for 2 full days without immediate worry and concern from loved ones? The truth is a case of tragic bad timing. Brittney's disappearance was overshadowed by a grisly coincidence that played out like an unexpected storyline from some movie. In the hours that Brittney slipped away without a trace, her family was simultaneously distracted by a gruesome discovery. Her uncle had been found dying in his SUV in a secluded area of the woods near his home. A gunshot wound in his head. And when her family tried to find Brittney to tell her the news, she was nowhere to be found. So if you're like me, you're probably wondering, were these two events related? Was there a connection between Brittney going missing and the death of her uncle? It seemed there were more questions than answers in May of 2012, as a family searched for a young daughter who seemed to have so much life ahead of her. And before we go further into Brittney's story, I think it's so important for us to remind our audience, Brittney is so much more than the missing persons case that she would ultimately become. She had a life and a history. She was often described as a free spirit who bounced from one relative's home to another, a sort of social butterfly who had no shortage of friends to call upon. And perhaps most importantly, she was a mom to her own beautiful baby girl. Then one summer day, Brittney Wood left the front yard of her family home in Theodore, Alabama, walked across the front yard, and disappeared down the street. She was never seen or heard from ever again. This is her story.
Used to think it's in my head, but I'm walking with the dead.
Mobile, Alabama is a saltwater port along the Mobile River on the north-central Gulf Coast. It's one of those southern coastal towns that's a unique melting pot of its people, cultures, and traditions. A place where the locals take their home stomping grounds very seriously. The tourists may come and go, but those who live in Mobile and its surrounding communities plant their roots deep. Brittney's family was no different. She was born and bred on the outskirts of this place, in the piney backwoods of Theodore, Alabama. Born Brittney Nicole Wood on September 25th, 1992, to Wally Hankey and Chessie Wood, she was the middle child of 3 kids. As a little girl, Brittney was both loving and loved. She was surrounded by a large extended family that provided support, camaraderie, and many bright spots in her young life. But as is so often in the sometimes cruel world, life has a way of doling out devastating challenges to kids. And Brittney became one of those heartbreaking casualties. In 2001, at the age of 9, she endured something no little girl should ever be forced to experience. Brittney was molested by her maternal grandmother's boyfriend, Ronald Robertson. The sexual abuse allegedly happened on several occasions, according to Mobile police and court records. Further complicating everything was the fact that Ronald wasn't just some casual acquaintance in Brittney's life. As Brittney's grandmother's live-in boyfriend of many years, he'd been a permanent fixture and was even at the hospital the day that Brittney was born. But that didn't stop Brittney from testifying during Robertson's trial, giving a detailed account of all the terrible things he'd done to her. And on May 18, 2005, a Mobile County jury convicted Ronald Robertson of first-degree rape and first-degree sexual abuse. Sitting at the front of that courtroom and facing down the man who took advantage of her, spoke to the strength and resolve many friends and family always saw in her. Brittney was a fighter. She believed in standing up for herself and never wanted to see anyone hurt.
This may be one of the reasons she created such close family ties, especially with her siblings. Brittney's stepmom, Stephanie, noticed this about Brittney, how close she was to her two brothers. In our exclusive interview with her, Stephanie had this to say.
Those three, they kept up with each other. They took care of each other. You know, that was the tightest knit siblings I've seen. And I think it's because they all shared the same secrets, the same pain, the same hurt.
Stephanie was Brittney's father's second wife, and she got to know Brittney over a handful of years, filling the role of a kind of second mom in those important teen years. During my interview with Stephanie, she told me how she and Brittney forged a friendly relationship. She remembers it being typical of your average stepmom-stepdaughter dynamic, but with more good memories than bad.
I had 4 years with Brittney. Everything I know about her childhood is hearsay from her and from other people. So all I have is the 4 years of experience. And they were as pretty much anybody with teenage years. So they had their ups and downs. And the ups were amazing.
As a teen, Brittney seemed like some carefree girl straight out of Central Casting. She loved music and dancing. She enjoyed hanging out with her friends. And she had a deep love of animals, especially puppies. And she felt most at home outdoors. The 3 words that Stephanie feels are most fitting to Brittney are loving, friendly, and fierce. But it took Brittney becoming pregnant at the age of 17 before Stephanie and Brittney truly bonded.
Of course, being the stepmom, there wasn't a lot of interaction until the grandbaby. The grandbaby is what brought us closer. We got close. We got real close, where we talked daily, several times throughout the day.
Tackling motherhood at such a young age wasn't easy for Brittney. But thankfully, Stephanie and her dad were there for her as a soft place to land. They provided the love, support, and care that Brittney and her new daughter needed.
We had her child every weekend from Friday after I got off work until Sunday at 6 o'clock. Even though she didn't have her child, she'd come over to see her child. Her and the baby's dad, they called our house the resort because we had everything that child could want. We had our own car seats, our own toys for her, our own clothes for her, everything.
But behind the veneer of young motherhood and the joy and happiness it brought, there were darker secrets lurking. Very few people knew that Brittney was struggling with drugs and addiction. And it wasn't long before Brittney relinquished custody of her daughter to the child's father and family. Brittney's stepmom, Stephanie, remembers this uncertain time.
She did not actually even have custody of her child at the time. She had given up custody to him and his family over a year or so prior. And in hindsight, I would say it was because of what was going on within her maternal family. Of course, like I said, we didn't know. Well, I didn't say it to you, but like I've said in the past, her paternal family, we had no idea what was going on. She was struggling with drugs. She was struggling with an addiction.
That's not to say that Brittney wasn't a present and loving mom. She visited her daughter as often as possible at the paternal family home. But it was clear to most that Brittney was caught up in the whirlwind of her own low-grade chaos, moving intermittently between friends, extended family, and the father of her child.
I would say she was, for lack of a better term, transient, doesn't like to be in one place for long. So she would bounce from home to home. She'd be at her mom, she'd be at her grandma, she'd come stay with us a night or two. just bounce and bounce and bounce, never be anywhere long. Just didn't like to put down roots.
More and more, bad news seemed to be the lead headline for Brittney's family. Her brothers, whom Brittney adored, were dealing with serious problems of their own. Both young men had found themselves on the wrong side of the law. Brittney's older brother was in county jail, and the younger was being detained at a youth center. From every angle, it seemed Brittney's family was entrenched in a minefield of turmoil, a web of problems that even Brittney herself may have found herself snared within.
But all anyone knew on May 30th, 2012 is that Brittney had ventured out once again, presumably into the same sphere of friends and family which she had navigated many times before. This time, she would never be seen or heard from again.
The last person to see Brittney was Brittney's mom, Chessie Wood. She was standing in the front yard of the Tillman's Corner home on Leonardo Drive when Brittney exited the house through the front door, a tote stuffed with a few belongings hanging off her shoulder. Brittney told her mom that she was going to see some friends, and Chessie watched Brittney leave the yard and walk off down the road alone. It was 7:30 p.m. on May 30th, 2012. The last time Stephanie remembers seeing Brittney in person was at Brittney's daughter's birthday party. It was held a couple weeks before Brittney's disappearance on May 12th. Stephanie also remembers speaking to Brittney on the phone the day before she went missing. She still recalls this conversation because Brittney wanted to visit her younger brother at that youth center where he was being held. Visitation days were on Tuesdays and Saturdays, and Brittney was begging for a ride to the center.
She called her dad. He had her on speakerphone, and I will always regret, because I had the power. He didn't have the gas money, and I could have put gas in that truck, and he could have seen her, and I will always regret that. And I was like, no, let's wait, because I get paid on Friday, blah, blah, blah. How about Saturday morning? We'll take you Saturday morning. So they scheduled it for Saturday morning. That always is going to bother me that something might have changed. Wednesday might not have went the way it did.
While not much is known about Brittney's activities just prior to her disappearance, Stephanie later learned from Brittney's daughter's paternal grandmother that Brittney was supposed to help with a yard sale during the coming weekend. In early interviews, Brittney's mom, Chessie, said that Brittney seemed fine the last time she saw her, in a good mood even. But Chessie later changed her story, saying that Brittney appeared to be aggravated and frustrated the night she left the house, and that when she confronted her daughter, Chessie was told she, quote, wouldn't understand. Stephanie remembers a brief telephone conversation she had with Chessie the day after Brittney went missing. When they spoke, Chessie expressed the usual concerns about Brittney's transient, flighty behavior. Worrying about her kid the way mothers do.
Brittney was 19 with a child and thought she knew everything. So, it was not unexpected. She grabbed up her bag, filled up her bag, took off. And the next day, her mom called me and asked me, there's things I don't know what I can say and what I can't say as far as for the case. She asked a few things and I asked, why don't you call her and ask her? And, she didn't want to, blah, blah, blah. So, but it wasn't uncommon for Brittney to be gone a couple of days.
Whatever was going on with Brittney that last day, however she may or may not have been feeling, her behavior certainly didn't speak to anything out of the ordinary. We know that floating from one friend or one family member to another was nothing new for Brittney. It's just what she did. Her orbit seemed in constant motion. And on the evening of May 30th, 2012, she was on the move again. Then 2 days later, on June 1st, something unexpectedly terrible happened. 2 days after Brittney walked away from the house on Leonardo Drive, Brittney's uncle, Donald Holland, who went by the name Donnie, was found in South Baldwin County, Alabama, with a bullet hole in his head. He was discovered sitting in his SUV in a remote clearing that overlooked the Fish River. The self-inflicted gunshot wound at the base of his skull, just below his ear. Donnie was airlifted to a hospital in Pensacola, Florida, and passed away a couple days later due to his injuries. With most of Brittney's family consumed by the news of Donnie's death, this tragedy obscured the fact that nobody had seen or heard from Brittney for 2 days. It was only when family members began to reach out to her to share the news of Donnie's suicide and were unable to reach her that they realized something was wrong, that it seemed like Brittney had fallen off the face of the earth. Stephanie remembers the chaos during the discovery of Donnie's body.
That Friday, which was June 1st, the focus was completely on the uncle that was found shot, that everybody was assuming, and they still have ruled a suicide. The focus was on him. And it was, everybody was still just, I don't know if at that point, I don't believe at that point it was even known that she was, I don't think the friend had been contacted yet, because it wasn't uncommon to not hear from her. And her phone was still going to voicemail. You could still leave voicemails, and you could leave messages on her Facebook. So everything was focused on the uncle.
When all attempts to locate Brittney failed, Brittney's family called the friend that Brittney said she was planning to visit the night of May 30th. But the friend hadn't seen her. Brittney never came by that evening. The family then reached out to the father of Brittney's child, asking, had she been by to see the baby? The answer, again, was no. The father and his family had neither seen nor heard from Brittney. Wasting no time, Brittney's family filed a missing persons report on June 2nd, 2012.
Eric Winberg, a former detective for Baldwin County Police, was the head investigator of Brittney's missing persons case. Investigators used cell tower ping records to put some initial puzzle pieces together. It was quickly established that instead of going to visit her friend, Brittney had been picked up by her uncle Donnie, very near her mother Chessie's home. To be clear, this is 2 days before Donnie attempted to take his life.
Customers are rushing to your store. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust? Or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail.
Shopify POS is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Plus, you'll be able to connect with customers in-line and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns from TikTok to Instagram and beyond.
Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point-of-sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Do retail right with Shopify.
Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/murderdiaries, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/murderdiaries to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/murderdiaries.
After picking her up near the Leonardo Drive home, Brittney and Donnie traveled together toward the Fairhope area, a small community where Donnie lived about 30 miles from Brittney's home in Mobile County. Brittney was on her phone during most of this drive. We know this because her phone was pinging towers along the way. In fact, her cell phone records indicated that she was communicating with friends. Again, nothing out of the ordinary for Brittney. Per usual, she'd been using her phone a lot that day, texting and calling a lot of people, including her baby's father. Once in Baldwin County, tower records put Brittney and Donnie near a home for which Donnie was doing repair work. The home belonged to a friend's in-laws, and it was a place that also happened to be Donnie's temporary living arrangements. Then around 11:30 p.m., all outgoing communications from Brittney's phone abruptly stopped. Shortly after that, all incoming calls to her phone began going directly to voicemail. And then a little more than 2 hours later, at 1:47 a.m. on May 31st, 2012, Brittney's phone pinged a cell tower one last time. But now the phone was miles away from Baldwin County, in Grand Bay, an area much closer to her home on Leonardo Drive. This seemingly is the last known trace of Brittney Wood. But her connection to her uncle Donnie around the time of her disappearance would soon take a surprising turn. When Donnie Holland was found dying in the front seat of his SUV 2 days after he picked Brittney up in Mobile County, The suicide attempt seemed pretty straightforward. A remote area, a self-inflicted gun wound. Donnie even talked about suicide to his wife, Wendy. But as investigators began to pick up the puzzle pieces scattered around Brittney's disappearance, entirely new information came into focus that intersected with the death of her uncle.
Plot twist number 1, the gun that was found in Donnie's vehicle, the one that had been used to take his life, belonged to none other than Brittney. A friend of hers told authorities that Brittney had recently gotten the gun for protection. Stephanie told us that she'd never known Brittney had owned a gun.
And, then we're like, what are you talking about? Because we knew nothing about a gun. We had no idea she carried a gun. We knew nothing. We were completely, totally oblivious to a gun. But supposedly she was carrying a gun and it had 2 bullets.
The discovery of Brittney's gun in Donnie's vehicle seemed a little too obvious to some. Had it been planted there? Other rumors circulated about whether Donnie's suicide had been suicide at all, especially given the location of the bullet wound. In such an awkward place on the back of his head. Even Stephanie seemed curious about it.
To a non-medical person like myself, I'm saying, but I'm a non-medical person, I'm saying it doesn't look like somebody of his stature, which was a very large biker type of guy, and the gun was a very small, he could cover it up with the palm of his hand as a 25, a little bitty tiny gun. I don't see someone putting a gun to the back of their head like that to kill themselves.
Also, a ballistic analysis was never carried out on the weapon, meaning neither the DNA on Brittney's gun nor the bullet fired from that gun were ever recovered. But Baldwin County Sheriff Huey Haas Mack said the circumstances of Holland's death received close examination. He said that, based on all evidence, the suicide ruling for Donnie Holland remains intact. Nikki Patterson, the assistant district attorney for Mobile County, also later reiterated a similar position, telling Alabama Local News in 2019 that Baldwin County had every reason in the world to think of Donnie Holland's death as a suicide. To further complicate the details of Donnie Holland's suicide and shroud even more mystery upon Brittney's disappearance was the fact that Brittney's gun wasn't the only personal item of hers found in Donnie's SUV. Authorities also recovered the battery from Brittney's cell phone from his vehicle. And this is super important for our listeners to understand. I'm going to clarify. They did not find her cell phone. It was the phone's small, square battery pack. To this day, the reason Brittney's gun and Brittney's cell phone battery were in Donnie Holland's car the day he attempted suicide has never been fully explained.
And then there's plot twist number 2, which completely changes the complexion of details surrounding Donnie's death. Donnie Holland had been under suspicion of child molestation offenses, allegations which authorities were closing in on. It's presumed Donnie's threats of suicide to his wife, Wendy, were directly related to the weight of this investigation. The police were bearing down hard, and he had been scheduled to be questioned by the officers investigating the allegations the very day he took his life.
What's more, police had been looking into Donnie Holland for something far more malicious and wider-reaching than molestation allegations. Earlier in 2012, another of Brittney's uncles, Randall Scott Wood, had tipped off authorities about a child sex abuse ring, one masterminded and led by none other than Donnie himself. A conspiracy that included perpetrators from 3 generations of his family. Investigators learned that Brittney found out about this child sex abuse ring and, just days before she vanished, had gone as far as to exchange messages with one of the sex ring's alleged victims. Authorities believe that Brittney may have been ready to expose the sex abuse ring publicly. In fact, some of Brittney's family members believe that when Brittney confronted Donnie, he killed her and then committed suicide. But it should be noted to our listeners that there has never been any evidence brought forward to support this theory. A total of 11 people involved in the child sex abuse ring were later arrested, including Donnie's wife, Wendy Holland, Brittney's maternal aunt. In 2015, she was sentenced to 219 years in prison after being convicted of sodomy, sex abuse, and child torture. In the days after Brittney disappeared, a search began in earnest to find her. Missing posters were taped to shop windows and telephone poles all over southwestern Alabama. A plea to anyone and everyone to be on the lookout for the pretty girl with dirty blonde hair and blue eyes, the girl who had vanished from Mobile County without a trace. Search and rescue units from neighboring counties, including more than 70 local volunteers, joined the search effort as they combed the 5-mile radius within which cell towers and phone records had placed Brittney. Even the Salvation Army of coastal Alabama showed up with food and water provisions for all those trying to find Brittney. Meanwhile, Brittney's family reached out to her cell phone provider and gained access to her phone records. Here's Stephanie's memory of how that unfolded.
On June 5th, her father and I went to AT&T, who Brittney's phone was through. It was a prepaid phone. We explained the situation, and they gave us access to her phone records. At that time, her phone had gone to voicemail. Voicemails were full. And then all of a sudden, her voicemail was opened back up again, and then it went back full. You were able to leave messages.
It seems someone else was interested in Brittney's phone as well, Wendy Holland. In fact, Wendy hacked into Brittney's voicemail box and erased all the messages in the voicemail system. Another important piece of information to include here is that Wendy Holland was also found to have deleted several messages from her husband Donnie's phone the day she found him in his SUV. Now here's Stephanie speaking more about Wendy hacking into Brittney's phone.
Well, we found out later that was because the wife of the uncle, the aunt, alongside of the mother, was able to break the code, the 4-digit code, after days of trying, ironically using the uncle's phone that the police let her keep, got into the voicemail and erased the voicemails. Well, erased, I'd have to look at the records to be exact. I cannot remember. I think it was 4 minutes and something worth of voicemails.
When the family confronted Wendy about why she deleted Brittney's voicemails, Wendy said she did so in case Brittney tried to call her phone and leave a message.
Why would Brittney call herself? It's like, that makes no sense. Why would Brittney? Because when the uncle was found, because the aunt was the one that found him in the woods and called 911, she also deleted stuff off of his phone. That's why people believe that he did not shoot himself.
The family was also interested in the content of the text messages that Brittney was sending and receiving the night she disappeared. But because of laws in place to protect certain kinds of personal information, they would need a court order to have access to the actual text messages, both incoming and outgoing. And the 3-month window to obtain the text messages before they were automatically erased was closing. So time was of the essence. But police weren't exactly cooperative when Brittney's family urged them to obtain the court order. Some authorities involved were never truly convinced that Brittney had gone missing at all. Their thinking was, it's not unheard of for 19-year-old girls to sometimes just up and leave their life for good. So they thought, why go through all that trouble for somebody who probably just skipped town? But whatever the reasoning for police inaction, the server expiration date came and went, and Brittney's text messages were lost forever. Weeks turned into months, and the search for Brittney continued. Eventually, the Class Kids Foundation, an organization named after Polly Klaas, who was kidnapped and murdered in California in 1993, got involved with Brittney's case, dispatching volunteers to join in the search effort. And as a quick aside for our listeners, we have covered Polly Klaas's case on the podcast. Be sure to listen to it. As Christmas 2012 approached, a new missing poster could be seen plastered around Mobile County, with a slightly more grim message to go along with it. Hunters should be on the lookout for Brittney's body in the woods that season. On May 30th, 2013, the 1-year anniversary of Brittney's disappearance was honored by a prayer service and candlelight vigil at her mother and stepfather's home. And on the 5-year anniversary in 2017, family and friends gathered to honor Brittney once more, attaching personalized messages to yellow balloons, Brittney's favorite color, which were released into the air at the close of the ceremony. In July of 2020, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released an image showing what Brittney might look like as a 27-year-old woman. While this image led to several tips received by the Mobile County Sheriff's Office, nothing ever came of them. The sheriff's office would also eventually obtain a search warrant to search the area in Grand Bay, which, if you remember, is where Brittney's phone last pinged in the early hours of May 31st, 2012. They brought cadaver dogs, and a dig was carried out, but no trace of Brittney was ever found. There's yet to be a happy ending for the story of Brittney Wood. She never came walking back up Leonardo Drive to her mother's house. She never stopped by her daughter's dad's house to pick her daughter up. She never showed up to help out at that garage sale. She remains a missing person. No one can say for sure what happened, although many have their theories. For Brittney, there is only a trail of unanswered questions. Why did she disappear? Where is she right now? If she's dead, who's responsible? Stephanie and Wally remain steadfast in trying to find Brittney. Neither of them has ever stopped searching. They both believe that someone in the family knows what happened to her. And they aren't the only ones who have noticed that some family members' stories have changed over the years. Of her whereabouts, Baldwin County Sheriff Huey Mack has said this: "If we look at it, there is more circumstantial evidence to say that she is dead. There's no evidence that suggests she's alive. We have her entered in the computer as a missing person. She hasn't come across anybody else's radar anywhere in the US. When you balance the evidence out, it's overwhelmingly that she's probably deceased."
The one thing that most everyone agrees on is that Brittney would never have just simply walked away from her life. She wouldn't have skipped town. She wouldn't have left her daughter behind. Stephanie believes this to her core.
So you can argue that point, that she would have left her child because she already gave her child up. But I don't believe she would have left her child because her child meant the world to her.
Whatever happened to Brittney, wherever she is, she remains lost in that deep, dark void of mystery that swallowed her whole so many years ago. That seemingly inescapable place from which so many other missing people like her have never reemerged. The sad and brutally simple ending to Brittney's story is that she left home one day, like she had done so many times before, and never returned. To date, neither she, her phone, nor any of the items she left her mother's house with on May 30th, 2012, have ever been found. Here's Stephanie one last time with information for our listeners on how they can support the family online.
On Facebook, it's Missing Brittney Wood. A lot of people want to put an S on the end, but there is no S. It's Brittney Wood. Missing Brittney Wood on Facebook is the page. And there's also Instagram. And there's also Twitter. I did have an issue where I wasn't getting messages on Instagram, but I fixed that. You can also find any information, and you can leave tips there too on uncovered.com about Brittney. And also my dear friends with Alabama Cold Case Advocacy would be glad to take any tips or any information you have about Brittney. And they have Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And also, we have TikTok on the Missing Brittney Wood and TikTok for the Alabama Cold Case Advocacy. And then if you have any tips for the Mobile Police Department, you can contact them at 251-208-7211.
Brittney is Caucasian, stands 5 feet 1 inches tall, and weighs 105 pounds with a thin build. She was last seen wearing a blue tank top, blue denim shorts, and flip-flops, and carrying a pink or teal tote bag containing extra clothing, a red curling iron, a makeup bag, and a cell phone. She has dirty blonde brown hair and blue eyes with a lip piercing and a tattoo reading Payton on her left leg. There is a $1,700 reward for information that leads to locating Brittney Wood. Before we end today's episode, I'd like to leave you with a resource. If you or anyone you know has been a victim of sexual assault, help is available. Visit the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network website or contact RAIN's National Helpline at 1-800-656-HOPE, which is 4673. That number again is 1-800-656-HOPE, 4673.
Make sure you follow us on all of our socials at The Murder Diaries Pod. And remember, until then,
Stay safe.
Bye.
Seeking the truth never gets old. Introducing June's Journey, the free-to-play mobile game that will immerse you in a thrilling murder mystery. Join June Parker as she uncovers hidden objects and clues to solve her sister's death. in a beautifully illustrated world set in the Roaring '20s. With new chapters added every week, the excitement never ends. Download June's Journey now on your Android or iOS device, or play on PC through Facebook Games.